Welcome back to the channel. We are here today to discuss a topic that I've spent quite a lot of my life doing, but haven't really talked about much on the channel, and that is how I like to paint car parts. Now keep in mind when I say that, I'm not talking about body panels for the most part, although I've hacked away with some spray cans in my time. What I'm talking about is stuff like what's in here. This is a brand new brake drum, and lately I've been trying to buy these that are already painted just to see what the quality of the coatings of the factory stuff is like, but in this application it is not available as a pre-coated part. Also, this is sort of a weird application, so this is kind of expensive for a part of its kind. I think these are 60 or 70 bucks, which for a passenger car drum is a lot of money in this day and age. So I definitely don't want it to just turn to rust in a heartbeat. Speaking of, I'm coming from this from a rust belter's perspective. Where I live in the world, stuff rusts year round, 12 months a year, never stops. I actually have some OEM brake lines on my Blazer right now that have done nothing but sit in the driveway for 2 years. And they came from Oklahoma looking spotless at 20 years old, and they're already starting to form some surface rust. There you can see what I'm talking about. All that goo, how it's looking tarnish. That has done nothing more than just sit outside for 2 years. No salt, no direct rain, anything else. And those were like new when I got them from out west 2 years ago, so it's a bad problem here. So this is the basic system that I've been using for about the last 20 years. It's a long way from perfect, but essentially this buys, I would say, 5 years of looking really nice in daily use, and then probably 10 to 15 of occasional use stuff, basically stuff that doesn't go out in the winter. At 10 to 15 years it'll look pretty good, or if you're storing indoors, it's good indefinitely. But the system's really basic. Since we have a brand new part that's going to be coated in some kind of oil or cosmoline kind of, grease kind of stuff, we need to get all that off of there. I found the easiest way to do that is just some good old brake clean, a rag, maybe a nylon brush, something like that, and just clean stuff off. After that, I use a grease and tar remover, or a wax and grease remover as this is labeled. This is PPG Acryliclean DX330. I've been using this stuff forever. Any wax and grease remover will probably be fine. A lot of guys will use mineral spirits and stuff like that. I somewhat suspect this isn't really all that different from that, but it works good. It's not that expensive. You can get that at most professional paint supply shops that sell PPG. And then the biggest variable over the years has been the paint, because I'll find a paint I like and then I can't find it, and so on and so forth. But what I've been doing for about the last 5 years has been working out really nicely is the Rust-Oleum brand engine primer and engine paint. It seems to be a really durable paint. It goes on pretty well. Dries pretty nicely. Probably my longest term durability tests on the tractor, parked right back here. That's the seat you're looking at for it. I did a cam cover on it like 3 years ago, and it's just been doused with grease and oil and stuff the whole time. It's holding up great. It doesn't spend much time in the elements, but generally speaking, it's been going well. So this is the system I've been using. This is the system I'm going to use today. The reason I decided to document it now is because I'm thinking about trying a few new things. Technology has improved for the last 20 years. Materials have been kind of getting easier to get, kind of getting easier to use. Like now you can get full-blown 2-stage epoxy primers in a rattle can. This little thing in the bottom you pop and you get an epoxy primer out of a spray can. It's kind of expensive for what it is, but that stuff really wasn't around as much when I got into this hobby years ago. So I want to start going down some of those roads. But before I do, I just wanted to establish a baseline for how we do it today. All right, so the name of the game here is cleanliness. Paint does not stick to anything that is dirty. So that is why we have 2 stages of grease removal. And the first stage is just going to be pretty basic. We're just going to take our brake clean and some rags and just get the shipping oil off. Of course, modern day and age that it is, this came from China. So they grease them up pretty good so they don't just instantly rust on the boat. I may be a liar. That actually doesn't look like there's hardly anything on it. I guess it's got a little bit. But for a first pass, there's nothing wrong with just a simple wipe down. And just get what you can before you get into your chemicals. Just save you a couple bucks. And these are just cheap Scott, box of towels, shop towels. Where we're gonna come into a problem is how rough this casting is. That is going to be a good time to try and get stuff cleaned out of. That's another thing I would kind of like to try, especially in stuff like this. I'm more and more thinking that brush painting and oil-based paint may be a way to go. because the oil-based paint should be less offended about the oil trapped in all this cast iron. At least that is kind of the thought. But really, there's not a lot to it but to do it. Wipe it till you get a dirty spot on your towel. Turn your towel so you get a clean spot, and keep going. And that is going to be the theme of the whole project, is we are going to just wipe this thing down until we can't get any more dirt off of it. And this is just a 25-cent garage sale broiler rack that I actually used for food for about 15 years. Is now a shop supply. Hit it with our brake clean. You can actually see it running dirty. Sort of the same thing as before, just top to bottom. You can see we're getting a little bit of dirt. And there, my towel's actually staying pretty clean, which means we've probably done about as good as we can right there. So I'll just keep going around the whole thing, getting all these cooling vents, the whole deal. Probably also get inside the flange on the other side. In here, because I would like to try and paint that if I can. So I've gone about as far as I can with brake clean. Sure enough, down in this groove was certainly the worst part of the whole thing. Not a surprise. That's where all the oil and everything is going to run and set. That is also where they love to rust the most, at least around here. Same reason, all the salt and road dirt and everything will get in here and sit. So that is the result of my last effort. Not too bad. I'm going to move on to DX330 down in this lip. Just because it's prone to evaporate a little more slowly than brake clean. I'm also going to use about a quart of it here, which if I had a better delivery system I wouldn't. Truth be told, I do so little of this stuff that a gallon of this stuff lasts me decades. Now I've got the 330 in there, and just fold my towel up, get back to it. Whether or not you can see it on camera, I don't know, but I'm actually kind of pushing a little river of this stuff around. And there you can see my towel is actually pretty clean. This is also one of the areas where, if we don't get it perfect, that's okay. And this is a Bob Ross happy little trees kind of moment where nobody but us is going to know this is here anyway. And even in the machining process, you can see that too. It's got some machining defects and stuff. Like there's one right down in there. They know nobody's going to look at it that carefully. Yeah, it's getting there. I am not going to do the interior face, and that is because I like to anti-seize my axle flanges. So I would just be putting anti-seize right on top of paint anyway if I were to do that. And as you might imagine, the anti-seize does a pretty good job of stopping the rust on its own. Alright, this time I'll be a little smarter. I'm just going to wet a rag because I don't actually need the flood torrent. It's still coming out pretty dirty, but that's the process. You just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. It is worth mentioning that with brake clean, my rags were coming clean. That I thought, it looked like I was done. You go back with a proper paint prep product and you keep lifting more grease and more dirt. And that is the key to getting your paint to stick, is you got to get all that grease and dirt out. So I just finished my last pass with the acrylic clean, and you can see my rag is pretty clean. That is more or less what I'm looking for. With that being a cast iron part, you could go forever and still get really small amounts out of it, but it's as good as it's going to get. So now you may be able to see there's little fuzzes and stuff from those cheap paper towels. So of course I'm not using any kind of tack rags or anything here, but I still want to minimize the impact of that stuff as much as I can. So I'm just going to hit it with some compressed air. I am running a oil and water separator on my compressed air, but for many years I didn't, so. I'm also using the air to just dry it out so we don't have the acrylic clean or whatever thinning the paint, or like dripping down. All right, so from here on out, we want to make sure we have clean gloves, which means if you've got sweaty head, you wipe your head with your hands with your gloves. No good, pitch them, get new ones. But my next move here is I'm just going to take some painter's tape and go around the friction surface, just because I don't want it painted. It's okay if it's not perfect in the end. We can always clean it up with some thinner or whatever, but it's just a little bit easier to not get paint on it the first time. In the past, I'd also go nuts and like tape it off real carefully and paint this face of the drum too. I've just decided that kind of detail isn't usually worth it. If this were a super high-end collectible car or something, yeah, maybe, but for what the vehicle that this is going on is, we are already way overachieving. The tape will also kind of give you a good reference point to see if you got your part clean enough, because if there's much of any kind of oil, tape won't stick to it. All right, now the tedious part. I would like to actually get a pretty decent tape line along here, and the reason for that is because I want to actually get this flange painted as far in as I can, because what happens to cars in this part of the country is they'll build a good solid rust lip right here, and then you have to try and pull that off the shoes, and it's not much fun. So if I could ideally tape right up to this chamfer, right up to the bottom of it, that would be about perfect. That's going to be fidgety and just take me a little bit of time. You clearly get the idea of how taping stuff off works. So I'm just going to spend some time and try and get that, nice. And there we go. Got it taped off pretty much to the bottom of that chamfer all the way around. The next step is going to be to just get some primer on it. I'm going to primer this face first because I'm going to end up just having to flood paint down in here to get it in there, and it's going to take forever to dry. And while that's going on, I can actually turn it over and just set this face on a butter dish or whatever you got, just to prop it up, so then I can paint the top at the same time while the bottom's drying. Speaking of, normally I only really do one coat of primer on stuff like this. It's not like we're going to sand any off later, but we'll see how it covers and see how it turns out. So we have pretty much perfect painting weather outside today, so that is where I'm going to do it. Of course, this opens me up to dust and bugs and all kinds of stuff, but again, it's a brake drum. It'll be okay. I don't have a paint booth anyway, but if this were something I cared a little bit more about, I would pull vehicles out of the shop and actually do it in there. But the principle here is going to remain the same regardless. Just try and get as even of a coat as we can without making a river of paint, which to get down on that gap is going to be a challenge. I'm also going to do just a little bit on the outside edge, just because I think it'll be easier to do now than when I flip it over. Of course, I'm shaking the can the whole time I'm working. Okay, any more than that, I'm going to be hurting myself more than I'm helping. It's going to take forever for that to cure off as it is. That's quite a lot of primer in there. So now the move is just flip it over and do the same thing again. And there I've actually got it sitting on a can of Metal Rescue Rust Converter and that roll of blue tape we just had a minute ago. So now it just looks like a little mushroom house. So this is definitely a second verse, same as the first kind of thing. Black primer might have been helpful for this one since this cast iron is so dark, but gray is what I had. All right, so it's a nice sunny afternoon. Shouldn't take that too terribly long to set up. And like I said, I'm pretty pleased with how that's covering. So I think we'll just go right to color afterward. It's probably been about an hour, which is what the can says we need to wait. Yeah, it is super dry to the touch. So now the mission is just to color code it. And there it is after what I will say is technically 3 coats. The first coat, we just went with a dust coat, but then kind of in process, I put the actual first coat of paint on too. So the first coat was technically 2. And then this is a second coat after that first strip that was done off camera, where I just really laid it on. And given the nature of the part, you probably wouldn't be able to tell if I did a bad job anyway, but it came out okay. We have decent sheen, especially for as high as humidity as it's been lately. I'm not really seeing any big runs or anything. She's looking pretty decent. Normally, I would like to take something like this and let it cure out at least overnight, probably more like a day or 2, and then do another pretty heavy layer on it, and then I would call it good. Like there are some spots here that I see are maybe just a little bit thin, but this is also the face that the wheel's gonna go on, so that paint is gonna be more or less gone too. I also like the anti-seize behind the wheels, so this is a goner anyhow. Just wasn't worth taping off. This is dry to the touch, but still very much tacky. You wouldn't want to just put it down on something right now. That said, I would, if I can, like to get the tape out of the inside, because sometimes if you let this stuff sit too long, the tape will take paint with it. So I'm just going to try to be delicate. I've just got it resting on my hand. Now, got our tape back. And there you can see it didn't pull any paint with it, and that whole chamfer is painted. We did get a little extra paint here and there. Once this is sat for a little while, I'll probably go back with a little lacquer thinner on a rag and maybe just touch that up a bit. But it's not something I'm worried about right now. I want to give it some more time to cure out. In fact, you can probably see I kind of put fingerprints in it through gloves just by handling it like that. But time being of the essence and knowing that what's going to happen with this part, I'm not too worried about it. All right, I heard your collective outrage and I put another coat of paint on it. Now it is pretty much dialed in. We did pick up just a little bit more dirt here and there, but I am not about to cut and buff a brake drum. This is as good as it's getting. And I think it's pretty good. That is all there really is to it. I think it'll be interesting to see some of the other things I intend to try in the future, how well they go. But this is what I've been doing for years and years. And in the case of this part, it'll probably keep this rust-free, just sitting around for 10 years, which is plenty for me. Of course, there's nothing you're going to do on the inside where the shoes go. If this drum were to need to be cut, that would be okay, but I've seen these get so rusty where even if you cut them, they would never balance. So, at least now I've kind of headed that off at the pass. That said, it's about all I've got for this one. Appreciate you guys stopping in for it. We will catch you on the next one.